Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, happily ever after. Let's watch.
I have to respect the fact that they're just not ready. And the question also is, well, are they ever going to be ready?
Or cheers to you and Ed!
Dude, that's awesome. Robot man.
Okay, whenever they have these titles, it always worries me because it's usually something not great. It says here, as the party was winding down, Liz and one of her guests got into a heated argument. All right. Liz had the woman removed by security. So was it coming to blows? Was it violent or something? That sounds awful. It's hard to imagine. Was alcohol involved? Was it a fight about Ed? I mean, sky's the limit.
Obviously something happened, and that's like really up.
We'll talk about it. I think there's something there that we need to talk about.
No, there's nothing there.
Okay, so he's now saying there's something there that we need to talk about. So it has something to do with the two of them.
So the party's kind of wrapping up, and I see a friend of Liz grab her by the arm. I know her. She's a lesbian, and this looks like an emotional fight.
What? Okay, so... Well, maybe we'll get more data. Okay, so we heard Ed say we need to talk about it. So that sounds like Ed has a problem with something that Liz did. And according to him, he's watching them fight. It was emotional. It sounds like he didn't know what they were fighting about. And that the friend grabbed Liz's arm, and that the friend is a lesbian. I can't imagine how that would have anything to do with anything. And so... he's saying it looked like there was something going on, but was something going? So, all right, for Ed, he will think that things are happening when they're not. Why do people do that? Because of relational traumas. When we have rejection and betrayal in our past, that was real, or at least it very much looked that way, then without a tremendous amount of therapy, and we haven't heard him talk about going to therapy continually. I imagine we would hear that, but I can't know that for sure. But from the sound of it, it sounds like he just went to a short period, which was six months. For some of y'all, you might be like, 6 months, that's a long time to be in therapy. And it is. That's a good chunk of time. You know, that's like 26 sessions. So, you know, that's a good chunk. But given Ed's issues, I would imagine that he would require, I don't know. So my phrase that I say is that best case scenario, you will damage your child. So the best parent on the planet will only damage their child enough such that they need 5 years of therapy and no more. So that's the starting point. And so at least 5 years of therapy for him, but, you know, probably a lot more. And I would say that maybe a couple years, 2 or 3 years, working on the issue that is central to at least what we're observing, I think would, you know, be a good start for sure. So we're not hearing that. But anyway, so is he reading into something there? I don't know. Let's watch.
It's the way that people that have been intimate look at each other. I'm shocked. I'm like, what's going on here?
Wait, so let's rewind that because I interrupted him. But it sounds like he's interpreting him and this woman being intimate. So now, who knows? Maybe there's other data, but let's rewind that.
So the party's kind of wrapping up, and I see a friend of Liz grab her by the arm. I know her. She's a lesbian, and this looks like an emotional fight. It's the way that people that have been intimate look at each other. I'm shocked. I'm like, what's going on here? And I want to figure out what's going on.
Okay, so that's always a good place to start. If that, for him, it looked intimate, okay, hard to know how you could interpret it that way or what that would look like exactly, but okay, it looked intimate, and he's saying, I want to know more. Now, people will say this to themselves. And we've seen this on this show before. People will be like, "Look, I just want to know more." And we've even seen Ed do this before, right? Particularly with Rose. Again, I don't want to make assumptions about what's happening, but just so we can learn from this, it's like you might have a thought in your head of like, "I just want to know more," but might really be happening is you're sure about what happened and you're asking questions trying to confirm what you quote unquote know to be true. So I don't know if that's happening right now.
You're in a relationship.
Seriously?
Okay, so dynamic wise, she is being very affectionate. He doesn't seem to be reciprocating, so maybe she noticed. They edit this pretty severely, so it's hard to know, but I wouldn't be surprised if she noticed. Now, maybe she was in a relationship with this person and cheating on Ed or something. I'm sure that's what Ed's thinking. But anyway, so he says, "Were you in a relationship with her?" Okay, so if you're truly worried and you are open to having a conversation and learning the information, you could ask a question like that as long as you are trusting the answer, right? And I don't think Liz has presented herself as someone who is untrustworthy. The only incident we know about anyway along these lines was that she was going to drive a guy home from work, a coworker, and she asked Ed prior to doing it, "Is it okay?" So that shows a tremendous amount of trustworthiness. Usually when people are cheating, they don't tell their partner, "By the way," you know what I mean? Now, could it happen? Yeah, but why would you suspect it? So he is asking, were you in a relationship with her? I think he's saying in the past, and let's run that.
I want to figure out what's going on. You're in a relationship.
Seriously?
That's what it looked like.
Seriously?
Later.
Oh, go yourself.
No.
So from the side, it looked like he had that face that we've seen. It's an aggravating face to me. I don't know if it is to you, where he goes, he does this knowing, superior, condescending, this little like, I'll rewind it, but I think he was doing that like, "Look, we all know you were in a relationship with her." So anyway, he asked that question. From the sound of it, he has zero data to back up what he is assuming to be true, but we don't know. But I think we would have heard that if there were more data. But anyway, he says, "Were you in a relationship with her?" And she's like, "Huh?" And she probably knows from experience in previous conversations. Because if I asked my wife a situation like out of the blue, something like that, my wife probably wouldn't freak out. She'd be like, "Huh? No. Why do you ask?" Because we don't have a history along those lines. They do. They have a tremendous history where she knows that when he has a tone of voice or when he asks a question like that, he's probably asked that question many times or different versions of it. Like Liz is talking with a coworker or something and he's like, "So were you in a relationship with her?" She's probably heard that many times. She's intoxicated. I think he is too. And I assume they're intoxicated at least a little bit. But anyway, that doesn't really have any super bearing on what's happening. Although so it is something to think about for y'all. I've talked about this before, that there's a myth out there, and it's kind of true, but not entirely, that when we are intoxicated, we are our true self, right? A drunk man's words is a sober man's thoughts or something like that. And that can be true. When we become uninhibited, we might actually be more likely to be honest, but that isn't entirely true, because when we are intoxicated, functions of the brain become inhibited, become offline, if you will, dysfunctional, if you will. And one of the first things to go offline is our prefrontal cortex, or at least it's heavily affected, meaning our prefrontal cortex, our executive function, is involved in emotional regulation, in reality checking, in organizing a lot of thoughts and working memory and stuff. And so when, in general, say you're sober and you were to see a scenario with your partner that might be concerning, your prefrontal cortex, your executive function, would be fully available to whatever extent it is normally, to say to yourself, like, okay, you're starting to, it's differentiation. You'll hear me talk about differentiation. Executive function is differentiation function. And so you have the ability to say, okay, I'm noticing I'm having a feeling. Let me reality check here and say, is that rational? Do I have any data? Because I feel like there's a threat here, and it looks like they are having a lover's fight. But given my past. Is that likely? I know I have this issue. Maybe I should mitigate my feelings or be a little skeptical of my assumptions or my feelings, or maybe I should maybe not talk about it right now. Whereas when you're intoxicated, there's a chance that you have no ability to check in with it. You just have the feeling and it just takes over your entire system and you run with it. And then you present that to your partner, and your partner might also have compromised executive function, and they might react very quickly against, and then the triggering downward spiral happens very, very quickly, potentially when people are intoxicated. Not that it's always the case or that people can't do that when they're sober, of course, but it does significantly raise the risk, and so it's why people should avoid having these kinds of conversations when they're intoxicated. Like, if I were there and I were their friend, I'd be like, hey, you both been drinking, give it a night. Like, I recommend not talking about it. There's no emergency here. Wait till tomorrow, talk about it then, because your brains probably aren't working quite right now. That they probably wouldn't listen, but anyway. So he says to her, let's rewind that, but if you see from the side that face.
I'm shocked. I'm like, what's going on here? And I wanna figure out what's going on.
Stop talking to you.
We got in a relationship.
Seriously?
That's what it looked like.
Seriously?
Later.
Well, maybe I just projected that face because I don't think I saw it that time. I don't know if I just imagined that the first time.
We got in a relationship.
Seriously?
Yeah, okay. I wasn't imagining it. There, at least there's an indication that was kind of there. It doesn't really matter. The point is that he says, were you in a relationship with her? And she's like, huh? And then he says, so here's a little tip that if you're in the Liz position, it's hard to know what to do because you're already in a crappy situation, but you want to maybe slow down. If I were a little therapist on Liz's shoulder, I would say, don't talk about this right now, wait till tomorrow. And two, I would say, slow down and address the question directly. And if he's having an issue, that's on him. It's not your fault. So just be definitive and have the answer and answer the question. And I would recommend that she slow down and just say, okay, so you're asking me if I was in a relationship with her in the past? The answer is no. We've only been friends. Does that answer your question? Because the way she's reacting could come across to Ed as an immature way of trying to obscure reality, which is that she was in a relationship. The other thing is like, so what's the accusation? That she used to be in a relationship with someone in the past? Like, who cares? So this is exactly what was happening with Rose, right? Remember that thing? And I remember being so confused back then because I hadn't had enough data around Ed, and the way he was doing it was kind of weird. But I don't know if this is what's happening right now, but it's reminding me of that, of when he's in the Philippines and he's just badgering Rose about her previous relationship. I don't know if it was a marriage, but it was the father of her child. And then the STI conversation was, I think, along those lines as well. Wow, a lot of things are coming into focus right now. So my hypothesis about him has been that he has relationship traumas, that he has developed a schema around people are going to cheat on me, people are going to abandon me, and people don't really love me. Now, you might hear that and think, well, but he's a jerk face and I hate him. Yeah, and some of you might not be that way, but that might be. So if you're in that camp of like, I hate him, he's a horrible, abusive groomer or whatever. And then I say there's a chance that he was very much relationally traumatized, perhaps very early in his life, who knows? Maybe particularly his marriage to the mother of his daughter might have also been difficult, and who knows what her story would be about him. But anyway, and he feels on the inside as a little child that is about to be abandoned because that's what happened to him when he was young. And that to you, those two things can't exist at the same time. I can't see Ed the way that I see him, which is a horrible human being, and see him as having an inner child that has justifications for feeling like everyone is going to abandon him. How do we reconcile those two? Those two are almost always present in those people anyway. The people who present as the most superior, as the most jealous, as the most attacking, as the most abusive, they often, not always, will have those very vulnerable, understandable parts of them on the inside that are reacting the way that they do. It does not justify it. And I'll say this again, that even if you are hearing me talk about this and you have a partner or a family member who is abusing you and who is overpowering and intimidating or whatever, and I am now proposing a compassionate view of that person, that does not mean you stay with that person. In short, and I've talked about this many times, but in short, when I see people in my personal life that might be abusing me, for example. I've lived 51 years. It happens. You're going to come across that sort of thing, unfortunately. I will be able to see them in that way. It will not be hard for me to conceptualize abusive people to me who are like that, and yet I do not. I'll try to work it out, but if it doesn't change, then I get them out of my life. As in fact, because I see the reality, because I'm not reality, but because I'm, at least I believe, I'm able to understand where all those things are coming from. And I'm able to identify abusive behavior pretty easily because I specialize and have specialized in that to some extent, that I very quickly can see the future, or I'm able to predict the future, that unless there's a firm reason to believe that things will get better, meaning they're in therapy and they've been apologizing to me and I have a way of telling their therapist what they're doing or something like that, but that's pretty rare. So unless there's some kind of reason to believe that things are getting better. And even then I might distance myself because that person, it could take them 15 years before they actually get better and stop abusing me. So, but if there isn't anything like that, then, which there usually isn't, then I'm like, there is almost no chance this is going to improve for me. I'm probably, no matter what I do, that abuse is going to keep coming, generating from their inner child that is abused and from their relational traumas. And the abusive person might even kind of know that to some extent. They might even be a therapist themselves, okay, and might understand that. But I will, quicker than other people, I will distance myself because I'm on this planet one time and I know I deserve better, okay, You can get this tumbler. Take care of yourself because you deserve it. By the way, I never realized why people used tumblers. Is that what they call these things? Insulated thing. I've always used coffee cups because I like the feel. I'm not a fan of like metal tumblers. Like you want a really good ceramic cup. By the way, you can get that too. Merch. But when you have a regular coffee cup, your coffee goes cold really quick. And so with tumblers, they stay warm for a lot longer, which of course is a big duh because it has insulation. But so now I'm a huge fan of tumblers. Anyway, point is that maybe they have like ceramic ones with like an air gap in between. Anyway, point is that when I identify that, I distance myself very quickly. And I feel bad for that person because I know that I am going to be another reason why they're going to feel abandoned because I'm essentially abandoning them. But that's not my job. I was not put on this earth to be a martyr and to be a sacrifice for everyone else's relational traumas. I mean, professionally, when I get paid and I'm only there for a certain amount of time and I have the power to be able to help the individual and they're there to receive help from me, then to some extent, when you specialize in personality disorders, I do kind of consider myself, in terms of when I'm in the therapy seat, I am a bit of a punching bag and I offer myself up in that way because you have to accept that. And if you're not up for that, you should not treat people with personality disorders. It's not great and it's not something that it's not a decision you should take lightly. I mean, along those lines, when I have a supervisee, a trainee who has their first client with a significant cluster B personality disorder, there's always this moment where eventually there's a lot of different parts of that supervision experience. It's very intense and it requires a lot from me, guiding and providing safety and normalizing to the therapist what they're going through. Because the therapist often is just like, I hate this client and they don't want to work and what am I doing? And I feel terrible. It's a very emotional time for the trainee. It usually happens within the first year at some point. But anyway, one of the components of that journey for the therapist that will be involved is, do you actually want to work with these kinds of clients? Now, it would be kind of silly to make that choice the first time, but sometimes I'll have a supervisee that'll be 10 years into their their career, and they will also be asking themselves that question. I tend to attract a lot of supervisees who want to work with people with personality disorders because they know that about me. And so a lot of times supervisees will head into that, but there will be this question: do I actually want to do this? It's hard on my soul, on my mental health, on my wellness as a therapist. If I'm going to be an effective therapist to people with personality disorders, again, particularly cluster B, histrionic, borderline narcissistic, I have to accept the emotional toll it's going to take on me. And I know some therapists will be able to say, like, no, if you draw enough boundaries and you should be fine. And the truth is if you're really going to be effective, that is probably not possible unless you're doing a kind of treatment where you're just teaching DBT skills or something like that. That can be engineered. But if you're really going to create a corrective experience, the long-term therapy that is recommended for people with personality disorders, you have to have an intense relationship with that person to some degree. And that means your genuineness, your authenticity, yourself has to be in the room and in contact with the client. Anyway, tangent upon tangent upon tangent. But for Ed, I'm proposing a conceptualization of him that might provoke some compassion. That does not mean that Liz has to stay with him, okay? So I think that's what's happening with him, is that when he was with Rose, as he started to feel more vulnerable and more at risk, and so not getting into his attachment style precisely, but for all of us, the closer we get to someone, the more is at stake. The more we've invested in a relationship, the more it's going to hurt if it doesn't work out, right? If on the first date, someone says they don't like you, that, maybe a better analogy would be, say you go on date 3 and the two of you decide you're going to be exclusive, and then the next date 4, they come to you and they say, sorry, I had sex with someone else, I guess we have to break up or something. That would hurt. But if you're in a relationship for 20 years and you're very much invested and you've handed over yourself a lot to the other person and you're really entwined, and then they say they've been cheating on you for a little bit, that is on average much more devastating, right? So as Ed gets more and more invested and more closer to Rose and to Liz, and it's probably some sort of a cycle, and it is a cycle, at least of what we've seen, then he starts to get worried. He starts to get paranoid, and because he's undifferentiated and he hasn't been through enough therapy, he latches on to some reason that would explain the feeling on the inside. He has a feeling of danger and of threat and of abandonment around the corner, and then he latches on to some detail that will justify his feelings, and people do this all the time. So he, with Rose, would latch on to, well, Rose has probably been with all sorts of men, and she's a slut, and that's why I feel threatened, which doesn't make any sense. And I said this back then. It's like, okay, well, say she did have an STI in the past. Say she did have sex with 50 different men. What does it matter to you? Like, that doesn't mean anything. The fact that she hadn't had sex with other people doesn't mean that she's any more or less loyal to you or trustworthy. But anyway, it's a cultural notion, particularly for men in my culture. So there's that. But anyway, so he, I think, feels that threat, latches onto this past, because he doesn't have any proof that Rose had currently cheated on him, but he can so that's probably what it is he probably first goes to, again, this is a lot of speculation, but he probably first goes to, she wants to leave me and she's going to abandon me. Then the next step is she's probably cheating on me right now because that's what happened to me when I was younger, or at least that's what I believed happened to me, or I don't know. But then he's like, but no, I don't think she's cheating on me right now. There's no evidence, but she might have had sex with someone in the past. And you're like, those things aren't really related, right? Like, and some of you will even ask me questions like that. It'll be like, well, my partner has been with a lot of people. Can I really trust them, right? And it's this weird belief. Anyway, so he does that. Then he tries to answer that question. He's like, okay, is Rose a slut? Has she had sex with? And I say slut in massive quotes there. But then STI test, if I can get her to if I can find out that she doesn't have an STI, then I can know that she hasn't had a lot. And of course, there's all this purity around women and ridiculousness that is in our culture as well. But anyway, so then I'm just asking questions. And then once that's resolved and it turns out she doesn't have an STI, Rose, then we're on a different part of the cycle. Rose gets upset, and she did, and was like, I can't believe you're doing this to me and insulting me in this way. And you're not offering yourself up to get STI. So what's up with that? And you probably had a lot more sex with people than I have. Anyway, then Ed will apologize. Remember, he apologized for STI and pressuring that. I'm so sorry. It gets her back. Then eventually it's her Rose's ex-partner. And there was that one night where they're in that alleyway or something on that street, and Ed's like, tell me more. I can't remember exact details. So he's, tell me more. Like, give me details about this guy. Who is he? And what was the relationship like? And I don't know if he was asking, how many times do you have sex? Or I don't know. It's just a lot of questions. And Rose is like, I don't want to talk about it. It was in the past. Why are we talking about this? And I think also Rose might have detected that I feel like there's some other reason why you're asking me these questions, and I don't appreciate this kind of interrogation. So we're seeing another example of that, I think, of like, were you in a relationship with this lesbian in the past? And this narcissistic, not personality disorder, but self-centered approach and superiority and withholding of affection and quiet anger at her and poking at her and sure, look, we all understand, look at you. Look at how pathetic you are, you little person, revealing that you had this past lesbian relationship. I mean, it's obvious, and it's in front of all these people. That's the attitude I'm getting from him. And on that phone call that we heard a much more exaggerated version of that, which I'm guessing happens a lot more often than we know about, obviously, because that's just one recording. And we also know that Liz probably doesn't value herself very much and probably doesn't register that this is very, very unfair to her when she goes through experiences like this. Alrighty then, that does it for that episode. Please, everyone, take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.